Hello to everyone checking out the Plan Mask YouTube channel. I have with me Sarah Johnson, who's a local DFW songwriter, singer, and painter. And really, this was a conversation that appeared, it was kind of looking at local projects in the DFW area and actually saw some of her, not just musical performances, but some of the actual projects she's been recently starting to kind of change the DFW local music scene. And we're obviously going to dive into the details of that and, what she's kind of hoping from that. But honestly, just, thank you again, Sarah, for not just taking out the time to kind of talk about what you're doing in these projects, but really just kind of your background and what kind of led you into your current painting and, songwriting.
Well, Grayson, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
For sure. Well, I really wanted to kind of really start it out with, I guess, kind of your upbringing. I was kind of wondering, did you have a family that was also creatives, or were you kind of different from maybe family members, or how did that start?
It actually was all of us. It was a very creative upbringing, and my mom is a former fashion designer and artist, and not as much music. It was just more like this creativity that was always in our house. And I'm one of three girls. And so, we're always singing together, playing imagination. So it was just part of everyday life. My mom specifically made up songs for everything. So we're setting the table, we're crossing the street, we're cleaning up our room, and she's making up little rhymes about it. And so I think that's just how I started to realize, if you are thinking something or feeling something, you make up a song. And then my dad did have a Yamaha guitar, and I referenced to that in one of my songs, just a kid with her daddy's old 6-string. So he had the aspiration to play guitar, didn't fully dive into it, but the guitar was in our home, and that's what I started playing. And he has great taste in music. So it's kind of all of these different influences that came together to do the songwriting, the musicianship, and then just hopefully having good taste in music.
Mm-hmm. And did they have entrepreneur mindsets at the time? Because I remembered, seeing around when you're at UT and you're kind of starting up in this family business with your family members. I was kind of wondering, did you all have an entrepreneur mindset from there, or were you creatives and that was just a new project?
Yeah, so it's actually been both. So both creative and entrepreneurial households. My mom was a wonderful fashion designer in the 80s, had a very successful fashion company. She still has women of her generation come up to her and freak out that they're meeting. It was Jenny Johansson Designs. And then my dad is a real estate entrepreneur, so he's been investing and just has always kind of had that driver in him. So between the two of them, and then even both parents were raised by entrepreneurs, so it's this generational entrepreneurship. And even when I needed to start earning my own money, my mom was like, what are you going to do about it? So it's starting off with your own lemonade stands. And then I taught art camps for kids starting in 7th grade. And I would have the neighborhood kids over for an art camp. So it was when we were taught to earn money, it was actually more just the entrepreneurial mindset of this is what you could do. You could start your own business. And that's really what all 3 of my sisters did. So that's just been a theme throughout my life.
When you kind of bring up when you're teaching these art camps at a young age, I was kind of wondering what is, I guess from painting, what's traditionally, I guess the hardest strategy or the hardest, technique for most people to pick up?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Grayson. I mean, I think the hardest part, it's not even necessarily technique. It's finding your style and finding your own way of painting, because there's a lot of painting out there and there's a lot of different techniques, and there's landscapes and abstracts and pastels and primary colors. And I think it's it took me a long time to really just kind of, it's finding your own voice in songwriting or finding, your own style in painting. I think, you kind of get the techniques down as far as mixing colors or how to use paint, all of the basics. And then the hardest part is what's my style?
And can you expand on your, I guess, style of paintings and when you do that, I guess when you do that style, are you able to Is there like an easy transition to other styles, or is it like totally different?
So the first style, or I guess it would be, if we're using our technical art terms, it's series. So the first series that I did, it was funny because I always loved art, always did art. You know, my elective in high school was art. Actually didn't do a lot of painting in college, but when I started this business with my mom, she was the painter, and we did all of these events and speaking engagements where we would talk about a women's devotional that we wrote together, and then we would have like our merchandise and the artwork in the back. And everyone asked, oh, you know, who does the painting? And I just got really tired of being like, my mom, because I knew I had a creative in me as well. And so, I mean, Grayson, I literally like locked myself in the art studio, and I was like, I'm not coming out without a style. And it's interesting looking at like the first painting and then where I am now, because you can see the evolution of like how far it came. But I at first just discovered this technique of mixing paint and making a shape that I do not tell my technique. It's people ask, but it's my proprietary painting technique. So I kind of just, it was like I just spent all day in the studio until I like painted something that I liked. And then it's funny because then like I looked at paintings that I had done in high school, and I can see that technique even show up. So it's interesting. You kind of have like this mind inside of you that you just have to kind of keep digging out to see, you know, what's in there. And then when I launched Sarah Johnson Fine Art, which was just kind of taking my art out of the whole family business to be on its own, just to have a more target audience to art buyers and interior designers. I knew I needed some more series. And so again, I kind of tapped into an art style that I had done in high school, is more geometric shapes, and wanted to tap into that. So I just painted for like 2 weeks. It's like benders, like 2-week bender, painting all these like more geometric styles. And then I came out with my new series. And then like a year later, it's like, okay, what's next? Like I've done the shapes, this shape, I want to do a little bit more fluid and free. And so I just got in the art studio and did a little bit more of like a free form style. So it's kind of, I mean, it's really just making the decision like, okay, I'm going to like do a new art style, and then giving yourself a little like grace and time and space to figure out how it's going to turn out.
Mm-hmm. When you're kind of like bringing up like going with your mom to like some of these motivational talks and like some of these things related to the business, I was kind of wondering, like, is there any like key, I guess, strengths or weaknesses being in a family business like that versus, if you just did a startup with friends or anything else?
Yeah. Family dynamics are a very interesting part of a family business. I mean, you don't have the red tape. You don't have the, oh, let me put in a formal complaint, or my sister is an amazing corporate employee, and figuring out like confrontation with her boss or how to bring up a problem is a process. And then when you're working with your mom, you're like, I don't like that. It's just very like direct. But then at the same time, when you have like the business problem, and then you're going from like that to like, maybe a family trip or whatever it is, you're switching, your roles from the family dynamics to then, mother-daughter. But we both have very strong personalities and very strong ideas and very different ways of doing things. So it's kind of figuring out how to compromise, valuing my mom's experience. And then also she has, I'm bringing in a new perspective and a lot of even like technology and some savvy that she doesn't have. So it's like working to figure out our strengths and how they work together, but then also being mindful of like preserving a relationship where you're not just, you're still like kind to each other, despite the fact that you spend all this time together and you're very direct with each other and you disagree. And then, so yeah, there's a lot to navigate with family business and relationships, and making sure that they're healthy in both ways, familial and business.
Mm-hmm. And was there any like, I guess like key lessons learned in that, like into your first like startup business coming out of like UT?
Yeah. So I think that one of the main things that my mom taught me is the value of relationships, which I think is huge for any business. It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, but relationships and connections and valuing people and serving people. That's one thing that she taught me really well. And then also she's just kind of had this attitude of like, let's try it. And I kind of wanted to always know the end goal. Like, is this going to work, or how's this going to turn out? And she's like, that's kind of what entrepreneurship is. It's like, you're going to try a lot of things that don't work, but then you realize that it's not that it failed. You just figured out a better way to do things. So those are two lessons that she definitely taught me really well.
When you like bring up like the kind of the just try it attitude being such a huge lesson in this business, I remember like saying about, you know, your travel to Nashville when it came to like the music. What was that, like a spur of the moment decision like that? Or was that like, you know, did you do your research like of going out there?
Yeah, that's a really great like tie-in, because it was like, okay, now I'm ready to really launch into music. And how do I kind of take this entrepreneurship? Because music is a business. I mean, God bless the people that can like be just creatives and somehow they have like a team appear around them to do all the business part. But for a lot of independent musicians, like we are doing it all. And so I realized like very early on, it's like, yeah, I'm like a creative and I can write songs, but if I don't have the business side, then it's not going to work. And, you know, even someone could actually like come alongside and maybe even take me in a direction that I don't want to go. If I'm not like thinking strategically about business. So when I went to Nashville, I wasn't super aware of the Dallas music scene. And so to me, it's like, okay, songwriter, Americana, Nashville. And we had great family friends. This is kind of the value of connections that we had made through King's Daughters. We did a motivational speech with this woman and became great friends with her. So she opened her home. I got to stay for free for like 6 weeks. And I literally I called, texted, emailed, connected, reached out to any one of like my 6 points of connection in the Nashville world. And then if I didn't know someone, I was like probably stalking them on Instagram and DM'd them, or like somehow found a cool record label and just sent them a cold email. I mean, did I get one back? Probably not, but I sent it. And so I just reached out and I just said, I am trying to learn everything I can about the music industry. This is a new endeavor for me. I haven't even recorded yet. Will you sit down and just tell me what you know? And I had such overwhelming response of just people that were like, yes, what can I do? How can I answer questions? And Nashville was so wonderful in that. I just think music people are just mostly, you know, they probably saw themselves in me when they were starting out with music, and they're like, sure, this girl's going to go for it. You know, let's kind of come alongside her and give her an hour of my time to answer questions. And so I definitely like approached it like very just networking as much as I could. I also was looking for a producer at the time. And then, you know, ended up actually finding one in Dallas through connections, through people, through asking, through emailing. And eventually when I found that recording studio in Dallas, it was a sign kind of to come home and at least discover what was in my backyard instead of uprooting my life and moving to Nashville. But it was such a valuable experience. And I mean, I couldn't have started any other way in my story, just because it helped me kind of like launch a little bit out of like my comfort zone and like commit to doing it. And now you have all these people that you've talked to that are like, how's it going? You know, you have this accountability. And then I also have this network in Nashville that's wonderful. I mean, gosh, with music, you have to know as many people as you can. So,
So you kind of like brought up like the idea of there being two aspects of being an artist, on like focusing on the art, but understanding that's a business and being able to do that. When it comes to like any maybe like new artists that reach out to you, or like, you know, are upcoming, maybe they have a few songs out of themselves, is there any like common, you know, situations or common things that a lot of artists are missing? Maybe it's, you know, maybe they don't really care too much about the marketing or the accounting or the budgeting. Is there like a specific, I guess, you know, subjects that a lot of them are lacking?
I think they think that when the recording is done, then like the work's over, and then like they're going to magically like release a song, and then like people are going to listen to it and love it and somehow know about it. And I mean, I did that with granted, I released my EP in the middle of COVID. That's another whole story, but it was like, you know, my record release party was March 17th of 2020, like the day before the world shut down. So then are like, okay, we'll wait 2 weeks. And then there's like no end in sight, and you're sitting on these recordings that you're so proud of. And it's like, okay, if there's no end in sight, people are maybe even listening to more music these days. I am going to release it. But then it's interesting. I mean, that's a whole other conversation about like EPs versus singles, because I actually ended up pulling my EP and I'm releasing one single at a time, because each song like takes its own like marketing campaign for people to hear it. So it's like the aspect of like, okay, the record's done, then what? I think that's what a lot of like, I'm still figuring it out. Like, what next? How do you get as many ears on your music and eyeballs like on your face? And so I think one, it's I hate to say this, but it just takes a lot of money. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people can do it grassroots, but it's like more of an investment than people really want or sometimes like realize it could take. Cause yeah, I can get a ton of streams on Spotify just by paying for playlist placing, you know? So it's like, there's kind of a monetary thing that is hard. And then one thing to very directly answer your question, Grayson, it's like, what are a lot of people missing? I think a lot of people miss like the aspect of teamwork. And I think that what I'm realizing now is that the more that I can collaborate with other artists, other businesses. I mean, I know this sounds funny, but like I borrowed a pair of earrings for a concert and this jewelry designer gave me a shout out on her Instagram and I gave her a shout out on my Instagram. And then I returned the earrings and we got to reach each other's audience. And she has a whole Instagram following that would never hear about my music otherwise. So it's like the idea of being creative with your collaborations, even outside of the music world, is something that I think is really important, that the sooner you can discover it and the sooner that artists can latch onto the idea of just this kind of social media world and how to leverage it in your favor by connecting with people and doing creative collaborations is something that like I'm just starting to do, but I've seen a lot of results.
On like the idea of collaboration and, you know, why it's so important to you, I was kind of wondering, like, you know, does any artist come to mind on people you've collaborated with in the past that maybe have like sparked more creativity in you or, you know, helped bring something out in the music?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because Dallas is not really a co-writing city, and I like didn't even know what co-writing was until I went to Nashville, and people were like, "Yeah, are you doing co-writes?" Or, you know, like, "What's your co-writing like?" And I'm like, "I have never done that." Like, and so it's that was a really cool discovery to then like be open to co-writing and see the ideas that could come up. And so really the person that I trusted the most with that ended up being my producer, Beau Bedford, and just sitting down with my songs and letting him like add a bridge or change something or even be like, that lyric doesn't make sense. And, you know, in my heart, I'm like, oh, this is my lyric, you know, but then being like, okay, no, like this is better the other way. So I think the kind of first collaboration as far as like the music that really influenced me was just working with him on the songwriting. But yeah, there's other musicians that like Ray Johnston is one. He's more of like a Texas country guy, and he's one of the first artists that I even met in Dallas, and is a really good friend. And I saw him do a lot of business collaborations that I thought were really cool, and that's kind of what, you know, also was one of the first people that I saw doing that.
Like on the topic of like you working with like your producer and like on like the idea of co-writing, is there like any songs that maybe it started, you know, on one specific subject and then it became something like totally different or met totally different like after like the co-writing experience?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, Volcano, which is the title track to my EP and the first single that I released. Actually, it was to the first EP and then I pulled it. So Volcano. That song was actually about a guy that I liked that I like didn't know what to do with my emotions, and it just felt like every time I'm around him I was like a volcano, like so many kind of like emotions that I wanted to tell him but I couldn't because I mean not couldn't, but he was just actually a really good friend. And so it's like, what do you do with these? And you kind of just feel like you're about to burst because you like really like him. And basically got into working with Beau, and I was kind of like, you know, there's something to this song that I really like, but I'm not really sure that I just like love the direction of even just the meaning of it, but I love this imagery, I love this idea. And then he just started working with me on like, well, what about the idea of like you kind of bursting into music? And I think he like was like looking out the window playing his guitar, and he was like, did you know that the land around volcanoes is some of the most fertile ground in the world? And, you know, just like starting with the thought where it's like, cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about volcano symbolism. And then you just have this interesting conversation. And then I think, even hearing more of my story about like playing my dad's 6-string and was and piecing together some of that, that was just cool. But the song totally was not written about my singing launch or career or dreams. It was literally about me liking a guy and like suppressing it. So that's an example. And then Look What You've Done, which is the single that I just put out, was actually a very sad song. It was like, I literally wrote it like, look what you've done. I don't like anyone else but you, and you don't like me back. But I played it so upbeat, and it was just like a fun song that I'm like, the meaning and the music don't match. And so came to him with the idea to change the, like, look what you've done. I don't like anyone but you, and make it actually happy. And then we worked together to like flip the lyrics to be a happy song. And I love how it turned out. So that always happens, just with co-writing or in your own songwriting process. I have a phone full of notes that who knows what little hooks or things are going to turn into.
When you're like bringing up kind of like the EP, with it being an EP, I was wondering if you could like expand on like the difference between like an EP versus a single, because it seems like sometimes, when I go on like new artist page, it seems like, I won't see like an album, but I'll see like 20 EPs, and I'm always kind of, it seems like it didn't used to be like that. If you can expand on that.
Well, people used to have a lot longer attention spans, and I think that the streaming world has been wonderful to make our world access people's music in a really easy way. And the music discovery is definitely like unlimited for people, because anyone can put a song on Spotify and who knows what can happen. But at the same time, and I'm guilty of this, like I play my Discover playlist more than anything else. And that's like an artist, just like one song. And then in a week it's going to change. And then I'm going to hear one other artist just like single. And then, and even just the structure that Spotify is, it's hard to find albums. Maybe I'm just really bad at it, but it just, you see the like top 5 singles, and then you have to really dig to find an album. So what I realized, and I think like just the listening styles of people have changed, the attention spans are shorter. Everyone's looking for the next big bright thing. And then also the way that the world is, if you don't like put it right in front of their face and you're like, here's one song, listen to this today. Like, I remember I released my EP and like 2 weeks later, someone was like, so when's your next stuff coming out? I'm like, I just put out 6 songs. Like, I will not be like, I just put a lot of money into that. Like, I don't have no idea, but I'd love for you to listen to like my whole EP. And I was like, they just didn't know. They only had heard my single. And so, and even, a year later, it's like there's songs that like people just can't see, and so they don't play them, and there's no streams. And so I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I finally just like 2022 hit, and I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I like pulled my EP, and then I'm just doing one song at a time with video, because there are a lot of people that have heard the song before, so it's like a new video, fresh content. Then along with that, like new imagery, just something where it's like, okay, today you can listen to this song. This is new, fresh, exciting. Go for it. And like people respond to that right now. And I think the more established artists can put out albums because they have the money and the backing, and then they get radio play a year later on one song that was on their album. But like independent artists don't really have the luxury of doing that. And we kind of need to give people like spoon feed, like one song at a time, just so people listen to it.
Is there like any qualities that you like in like a solid music video when it comes to, maybe any artist that you listen to?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, Grayson. I think that my focus on doing all these videos is that each one is just very different from the other. And so that it's new and fresh and exciting for people to watch. And so at least for like Red Bandana, we went like very storytelling and cinematic. And that's also because I had a videographer friend that helped me shoot it, which is a huge blessing. And then also, so then for Look What You've Done for that music video, I had actually just read a book on like social media strategy. And it was like the number one thing you can do is make things shareable. Like, what is something that you can put out into the world that people like, it makes them happy and they want to share it with others? Because you're going to get like free advertising if people say like, this will make you happy and I'd love to share this. So I thought long and hard about like a strategy that would make a video shareable. And that's where I thought of the idea of right before Valentine's Day, like letting people write their favorite things about each other and like reveal it to each other, and doing a very just DIY, fun, but like heartfelt, uplifting video where people would watch it and smile and then want to share it with someone to make their day. And so that's kind of what I focused on, was like the shareability. Now, the next song that I'm doing is Fire. And that's, again, more cinematic, but it's a totally different feel than any other music video. So it's fresh. And then the next one is going to be, it's like a vintage car commercial that I cut down and edited into a music video. So it's like a super different feel, but it's just, so for me, it's like, get their attention, do something different, and make it like shareable, or make it just at least like quality enough that it captures their attention.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to like ask on like with these different types of business collaborations, and kind of like back to your own like with your own business being faith-based, and kind of the jobs you had early on as a kid, being in faith-based organizations. I was kind of wondering, like specifically with the songwriting, would you consider like your faith as like the center focus of some of these songs, or is it kind of elements or symbolism that goes into the music?
Grayson, you have such great questions. I love this. So with my faith background, I have been writing songs since I was like 2 years old. And all of them, or most of them, have been worship songs. And that's been a huge part of the way that I express my faith, is through songwriting with like praise songs to God. And I have a lot of Christian songs that are released kind of under like King's Daughters, the endeavor that I had with my mom. And it's funny because, I mean, literally, I just had like a bad breakup, and I was like, I don't really feel like saying, praise the Lord right now. Like, I'm feeling really sad. And I also listen to a lot of music that's not just worship music. Like, I have so many from childhood, just amazing songwriting influences that like I would love to write like them. And so I think it was just also is like, actually, I would like to take faith a little bit like out of my songwriting, so I can just kind of spew what I'm feeling and like release that. And it doesn't necessarily always have to have some happy ending, you know, of like, but it'll be okay. It's like, there's permission, I think, sometimes with secular music just to say what you're feeling, and it doesn't have to resolve with the like, but it's going to be okay. It can just be more like, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to sit in it for a little bit. And I'm also, it's a little bit therapeutic, and other people can relate to it. And I'm going to just be with them in that emotion, and be with myself in that emotion. Now, I do think that redemption is a huge quality that I do try to incorporate into my songwriting when possible. So the next song that I'm coming out with, Fire, it's like this whole song that's very sad about like, we could have been great, but you let us die, basically. And the whole song is like, we could have been fire, we could have been fire. And the last line is, I'm going to be okay because I will find fire. So, you know, even though we could have been fire, it didn't work out, I will find fire. And that's like the last line of the song. So sometimes there is that like desire for redemption and like for it to like work out, that I think comes from my faith background, because I do believe that like God does work things together for the good, and he does have, you know, good in mind for us. And so that's where sometimes you'll see elements, but then other times it's like, I'm just sad, I'm just going to write about that, you know? So that's where I would say it's a little bit more of just sitting in the feeling than necessarily like having to resolve it, where faith-based songs, you do resolve it, because the point of faith-based songs is to come out feeling hopeful.
And I was kind of like when you kind of bring up like the wide range of kind of dealing in these relationships, and then sometimes just feeling sad, being influences for the songwriting. I was kind of wondering your thoughts and just like your own personal songwriting experiences on like the effects of COVID-19. You know, what are like the huge quality differences or, you know, themes that possibly goes into the songwriting because of the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I do think that, I mean, at least for me, Grayson, like it kind of was a creativity kill. Like, you know, it was a little bit hard because I think for a lot of artists, it's like, what's the point? Like, we're not even going to be able to like sing this, you know, like what has happened, you know, what is my life anyway? Like a little bit of crisis for artists. Cause it's like the main way that we share music. Like I did like the live stream, and actually I had some great things where I did like Tuesday tunes and got to connect with people like we're doing now, you know, on stream. And so, you know, it did make people be creative with like how to share music and utilize technology more, which is always great. But as far as like songwriting, I think for some people it stretched them, and they were doing like, okay, a song a day, you know, and they like used it to actually be like a creative solace of like pushing themselves. I did not do that because I also was like sitting on all my recordings. So I was like, oh, like, what am I going to do with this? So I didn't even like have any energy to like write songs because I just finished my recording process. So it's interesting. I mean, I think for a lot of people, I mean, there was a lot of life introspection. There was a lot of creativity. I mean, I did write a quarantine song with my boyfriend at the time where like we couldn't see each other. And so we wrote a song about, you know, being like having a relationship over FaceTime. So for some people, it like stretched them a little bit in like a new creative direction, or, you know, they did challenge themselves to take the time to sit and write and maybe work on other songs. But, at least for me, I wouldn't say that it was my thriving creative time. But also I was in like a new relationship too. So I was also like very excited about that. So I think sometimes my songwriting comes from a little bit more of a deeper, darker place, which sounds funny because I'm a very happy person. So it's funny because I just didn't really write a lot of songs because I had like just started this relationship. And so that was actually a part of it too, you know, just factor even more than COVID.
No, well, I'm definitely, you know, glad to hear it, and definitely excited to everything you have like upcoming, you know, either from the EPs to the Girls of DFW project to your painting business and some of the art projects you have upcoming. I think it's definitely really cool what you have upcoming, and I think it's going to be really good for the business. Honestly, you know, I wanted to just thank you again, Sarah, not just be able to kind of explain your own personal background and, you know, what comes into the art, but also just being able to give like tips and advice to maybe any local DFW creatives possibly trying to follow in your footsteps. You know, they'd probably, you know, need great advice on these types of subjects. And, you know, I think it's going to be really good information.